Yep, I know. No, might not. It always happens. You know me. When life falls apart, that's when you're getting promoted.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation for September 18th, 2024. I'm Steve Brandt, the President of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to ensure greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Fry is absent. Commissioner Abene.
Here.
Payne.
Present.
Chuktai.
Present.
Vice President Priest-Insson.
Present with bells.
President Brandt.
Present. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. I'll now offer an acknowledgement that we are meeting today on the tribal lands of the Dakota people. We will now proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's Legislative Information Management System, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Board members, today's agenda is before us. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have proper motion before us. Any discussion? With that, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Next is the acceptance of minutes from the September 11th, 2024 meeting. May I please have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion before us. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the minutes are accepted as presented. Now, item 4 on our agenda is the acceptance of public comment on any item that's on the board's agenda today. And I will inquire with the clerk whether anybody has signed up.
President Brandt, no one has signed up to speak.
Okay, since no one has signed up to speak today, we'll continue to our next item on the agenda. Item number 5 is a resolution to fix the maximum certified tax levies for property tax payable in 2025 for various levies from general taxation. Would someone move the resolution for purposes of discussion? Commissioner Chuktai.
So moved.
So moved. Yeah.
Okay, and second?
Second.
All right. So the motion has been made and seconded. In the pile of resolutions related to this topic before you, the top one is labeled motion by Brandt. I will not be offering that today. Is there a discussion, or are there further motions? Commissioner Abeni.
Yes, I'd like to move a motion to amend this resolution, and please, clerk, please correct me if I say some of this incorrectly, but I'd like to move a motion on behalf of myself and Vice President Priest-Insson to amend the proposed resolution by increasing the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Fund levy from $88,444,432 to $900,978,000, and the total property tax levy from $510,087,042 to $512,620,610.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. Is there discussion? Commissioner Priest-Insson.
Yes, thank you. Just a few things before I get into my remarks that I wrote down to make sure I'm succinct. I just want to remind us all that it is our diversity and all the ways in which we are represented up here, and that diversity of thought brings us to better solutions, and it pushes us to work together in ways that don't exist in other places in the city because we don't have a tiebreaker on this board. And we've consistently been at ties, and we have worked together to compromise and meet each other where we can find a common thread, and I'm hoping that we can do that today. What I'm about to say next is not personal. It's not a judgment on people's decision-making. I think that there's a need, and there's a way to respond to said need. And that's where my remarks are centered today. But we find ourselves governing in extreme and unprecedented times as a whole. These times challenge us to pivot rather than to stand still, and systems have long relied upon they show their limitations, and these limitations are no longer meeting the moment. Today is one of these moments, a small moment, but one that can be a lot larger in coming years. We're faced with decisions that will have long-term impacts. That's every day. This request is not for something discretionary. I believe that what MPRB is asking for is the bare minimum to sustain their essential service levels. This is about staffing. This is about the youth programs that for years we fought to get, and now the positions, it's time to have the positions to be able to execute on that youth programming that we fought so hard for, and the community resources that many in our city depend on. If we don't act, I believe these shortfalls have a good potential to balloon in the coming years, leading to further issue, leading to a crisis in infrastructure that will affect the support that we give to our youth and our families at a time when our youth and our families need us the most. It's important to recognize the reality of what we're facing in government right now. There's especially when it comes to workers. We've seen across governments and even here locally where we've had a mass exodus of Black, Brown, and Indigenous staff at all levels. And these are people that we have relied on to make our government work, that are doing the day-to-day work outside of the decision-making. And we have to stop asking them to do more with less. They're asked to make $1 out of 15 cents. And we're governing through times that demand more than good intentions, and they require us to make real sustainable impacts. Yes, in budgeting, we often cannot meet every want. We all know that, whether it's our personal bank account or the bank account of the people. But this isn't a want, this is a critical need that will continue to grow if we don't meet this small moment that will have a large impact. I believe that failing to address it now will have ripple effects in years to come and put us in even more compromising positions where we're not talking so small of dollars. And it's just not worth risking our parks, our programs, and ultimately the fabric of our communities, which is people. There's people behind these dollars and these cents. Personally, I understand the impact of financial precarity all too well. I served my country during wartime, as many of you know, risking my life. And even then, I had to sell my home because of unexpected medical emergencies. And I had to balance my budget. And I just saw that if I didn't lose my house now, I'd likely lose it in a year or two. And impacts of property taxes are one of the reasons. And so my comments are not just as an elected official who's charged with particular duties, but also as a person who lives here in Minneapolis, and I feel the impacts of her decision-making just like the rest of us do. I think about the workers standing behind this request as well. Many of us stood with them during their contract negotiations, and these workers provide essential services to our communities. They deserve our support and our leadership. They've done the work. Our park sports staff has done the work to come as close as possible to what they need. And I think it's something of note that even with unknown circumstances and where those where those contract negotiations would weigh out, they came pretty darn close to the exact amount that they needed. And now there's a pivot and an adjustment as a result. I want to be clear that I'm not making these comments flippantly as some organizer or activist, but in my profession. And like I said, we're a board of 6, and every decision we make must be grounded in our leadership, our collective leadership. I, like many of you, have come to the table in the last 3 years ready to compromise when a compromise has been presented. And today I ask you to do the same and reciprocate. meet this need with the seriousness it deserves for our city, our youth, and a future that we all want to build, because those youth are our future and they are inheriting our decisions. Thank you.
I think I will next recognize Commissioner Benny as a co-author of the resolution, and then followed by Commissioner Payne.
Thank you, President Brandt. Powerful remarks, so appreciated from the Vice President of this board. And like many people, I think, in the city can see the work that the Park Board's been doing to change direction, change course, impact lives in a positive way. And those aren't just words. The other thing, and I mentioned it last time, this city, all of us here, our mayor, we've made these investments in the Park Board with our view to the long game, right? Not the short term. And if we don't fund what the Park Board is asking for, we are going to lose some ground, as the Vice President of this board mentioned. So I think it's, we've had some discussions, or people are aware that the proposed budget has a 7% increase for the Park Board. This is on the Park Board's portion of the levy, so not 7% overall. In fact, that's just a little over 1% of the city tax. But that our request was actually 10.07%. And so this resolution basically takes us to that full amount. I'd also like to say that we have different elected bodies. So there's the city council, and they're going to do their things. In fact, after today, they kind of know the edge or the parameter of what they're going to be doing, where the park commissioners, because we have to go through this process at this time, when we set that number forward, that was the parameter that we wanted to set, and there is nothing fancy in our request. This is funding staffing. This is funding obligations around wages and salary and so on. This supports our workers, and this maintains service levels, which means providing, parks and recreation in all those ways to the citizens, to the youth of our city. So I think I will leave it at that and maybe let some discussion kind of go on, but yeah, that's it.
Commissioner Payne.
Thank you, President Brandt. I first want to just thank the authors for bringing this forward and just really highlighting the need to support our park system, and especially the workers that make our park system as meaningful as it is and as good as it is. And I also really appreciate Commissioner Priest-Dinson's elevation of, we're showing up in a lot of different roles on this board. And for me, specifically in my role, I'm not just a member of this body, I'm also the president of the city council. And I weigh these responsibilities very seriously. And one of the responsibilities that we have to our city is around being able to identify what are our priorities collectively, and how do we fund those priorities, and how do we do it in a really responsible way. And I think that the motion that's before us recognizes the importance of our park system to the city and all of the cumulative benefits of having access to this type of a real asset, a real treasure for the residents of the city. And again, that can't happen without the workers. And so while I won't be supporting this specific action, I did bring an alternative in the event that this motion doesn't pass. And my focus is really around those workers and around that youth programming. There was a request at our last meeting around a number of provisions to help support the parks, but the ones that really stood out to me were the workers and the youth programming. And so as we move forward on voting on the motion before us, in the event that this motion doesn't pass, I have a alternative option, which is still funding increasing the levy slightly to support those changes to the workforce, to that negotiated agreement that we all on city council agreed was a really important thing to support. And I made a personal commitment that I was going to support youth programming on this body. And so my motion that is on the side over here, once we dispose of the one in front of us, is aiming to at least increase the budget enough to offset the costs associated with the workers and the expansion of the youth programming. So I hope to earn support for that motion. The one that's before us for the full $2.5 million, I won't be supporting today, but I'm really hoping that we get to this compromise that's balancing these priorities and the need for the fiscal responsibility of our city. Thank you.
Commissioner Benny, did you want to speak again? Okay. Mayor, did you have any, Commissioner Fry, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Mr. President, I can go either now or later, your preference. Greatly appreciate all of the deliberation that comes from this board, and deeply appreciate the extensive amount of work that has both come from our park board in delivering recommendations to my office and from our city enterprise and our finance team in suggesting a recommended budget for 2025. I won't be supporting this motion, and here's why. There are harder decisions that are going to be coming down the line. We have to start making hard decisions right now. There were countless recommendations that I received in our budget. Benevolent, extraordinary recommendations that anybody in their right mind, anyone that cared deeply about, anybody that cared deeply about this city would want to support, and please count me in with them. And we had to say no to the vast majority of them. This is not the budget from 2019, not the budget of 2021, or even 2023. The devaluation of downtown buildings, the fact that residents, both renters and homeowners, are having to foot the burden, and the fact that expenses have increased, have added to a situation that in the long term will be untenable unless we make hard decisions now. Over the last several years, we have rightfully, I'll add, increased the park board budget by $21 million, $21,207,000. This is a significant increase. In fact, it's the biggest increase in recent history. I support this work because I support the work that the park board is undergoing. I support the independence of the park board, and whether it be infrastructure improvements, like enhancements of parkways and streets or water quality, or it's the $2.7 million that we have provided ongoing to completely transform the way youth recreation has been handled in this city. Notably, it's the Park and Recreation Board. I'm all for it. And so in that vein, we gave a big increase this year. What the park board is asking for is a bigger increase. I understand why you would ask for a bigger increase. I understand the dynamics that you are facing, and at the same time, not just as commissioner of this board, but as mayor of this city, there is a greater scope that we've got to look at, which accounts for every department, every city service, and yes, the nation-leading park system that we have. And so the proposal that we put forward was for an additional $2,238,000. And I understand that you're asking for more than that. I will also say that most every single department in the city asked for significantly more than we were able to provide. I can't emphasize this enough. There were weeks worth of really hard decisions about what we weren't going to fund. If we had a different equation of revenue collection, it would be a different conversation entirely. If it was a progressive tax system, like an income tax, it would have been a different conversation. If we were funded at the proper levels, the rightful levels of local government aid, it would be a different conversation. If we had the kind of funding available and the increases in revenue that we had seen over the last several years, it would have been a different conversation entirely. By the way, in that vein, I've already committed to Commissioner Brandt, and I wanted to make sure we got this on the record publicly as well, that we will be putting together a group that is looking at additional revenue options. Whether you want to call it a task force or a work group or internal city staff suggesting and recommending what those revenue streams might look like and where we will get them from. You can call it whatever name you want, but we're putting together that group. That will explore a range of possibilities and authorizations that we could receive from the state to account for revenue shortfalls that we are seeing, not just in fiscal year 2025, but also beyond. I'm also asking staff to pull together a blue ribbon task force to examine efficiencies that we can find between the park board and the city. Areas where there is duplication of work, areas where we can better work together so that we can continue to fund this very important work that we all stand by. In the areas of youth recreation, climate, general park maintenance, how can we do this better? And so we're pulling together a group of experts that can help evaluate that so that we're not in the same place of having this conversation. Next year, we can find some efficiencies that I think are overdue. So I won't be supporting this amount. Again, we proposed a big increase. This is a bigger increase on top of that. I understand the general intent. I understand the underlying value, and at the same time, there is a broader scope that I have to consider. And so while I appreciate the sentiment, I'll be voting no.
Commissioner Payne?
Thank you, President Brandt. I think Commissioner Fry raised some really important considerations, especially from the perspective of the mayor, and that perspective is very similar to the perspective of City Council. And although it is, fraught to speak on behalf of the body, and I'm not going to do that, but it is the role of the body to ultimately finalize what that levy will be. So today's vote is to set the maximum levy, but it is going to be a decision, it's going to be a legislative process through City Council that will ultimately determine that final number. And I know that there is appetite on the body, although I cannot speak for the entirety of the body, and anything can happen between now and then. I know there is a real commitment from a lot of members that they would like to see that number be lower than what was proposed. And any movement today making that number higher makes that much more work and that many more challenging decisions that we have to get to a final number. But the final decision is not today on what the ultimate levy is. It will be by way of a council action at the end of this year. What's challenging is that council action, it does not, we do not make those decisions on behalf of the park board. We just set the max levy here today. That is the last time that myself or Vice President Chugtai get to weigh in on what the park board does. I would encourage the park board to try to look at hard choices to be fiscally responsible, to try to keep that levy as low as possible within your purview. But this gives you that flexibility to make some of those choices in a much more strategic way, and make sure that we don't leave any workers behind if we address that. And so I think it's really important to say in this space, absolutely, I'm going to be in partnership with Mayor Fry when it comes to looking at new ways to raise revenue for the city so that we have a sustainable future. And I am willing to work very, very, very closely with the mayor and his administration. We also have our legislative department that brings some capabilities as well when it comes to research. We have the benefit of having the Federal Reserve in town with a deep well of knowledge when it comes to these topics. And so there's definitely a bigger picture sustainability question to be explored going forward. And there's also, again, a huge appetite from the city council to really look closely at the mayor's budget and identify opportunities to keep this tax burden as low as we can while maintaining city services. And it will be hard. There will not be any easy choices in front of us. But that's what we signed up to do, and I'm personally committed to doing that hard work. And again, I'm not going to speak for every member of the body, but I will say that for myself, I am really committed to that. So I think that's just important for this body's consideration as well.
Commissioner Priest-Stinson?
Just want to thank all of my colleagues for their comments and what is an obvious willingness to do exactly what it is that I asked in my original comments, and also to go off of what Council President Payne just mentioned, also consider your two elected officials on this body as partners. We want to partner. We want to be at the table. We want to be thought partners with you. We don't just want to show up. I also don't speak on behalf of Steve and I, but on this one, I'm pretty certain that President Brandt would agree that we don't intend to just show up to the meetings and vote and go home. And so I just want to mention just one other thing. When we talk about downtown comes up a lot, and I know that we've talked when we talked about COVID and other things, we talked about, the economic driver that is downtown. And I just want to challenge everybody to remember that there are other opportunities to have other parts of our city be economic drivers. The majority of our city is not owned by us anymore. And there are communities of folks, a lot of them that look like me, that are taking back the village, and they are repurchasing properties, they are repurposing them, they are providing jobs, they're providing training, they're providing opportunities. And so as we start to expand and put together these blue ribbon task forces and other work groups, I just want us to center and remember that the very people that have been the most disenfranchised intentionally in history and are still suffering under the consequences of past decisions that we all inherited, that they are in prime position to know what they want because they live it on top of their, professional experiences and other expertise that they have. And so we have to start including them in and pivot the conversation to not just talk about downtown and what's possible. And remember that there are reparations come in many forms, and one of the ways in which that happens is making sure that they have a seat at the decision-making tables, and that we understand that there's a whole lot of opportunity across our city that's not just exclusive to downtown. And I just want us to remember that and to reflect on that as we move about our decisions and get into the rest of our budget process. And I want to thank everybody for being considerate and thoughtful in their comments and consideration and willingness to come to the table. Thank you.
Commissioner Benny?
Thank you. I just wanted to add a couple more thoughts. So the park board, our initial request inside of our organization with the elected officials and the staff was 13%. Remember, that's 13% of our budget, right? And so we thought that was too high, and that's why we came forward with the request of just essentially 10%. And I hear the mayor, I hear it, lots of people coming in with their hand out or whatever, lots of people with lots of needs, but it's not lost on me at all. I pointed out last time that the city's general fund is seeing a 10% increase. We needed a 10% increase, and we're being pushed down to a 7% increase. So I don't see, it isn't as clear to me that everybody's been giving up a little bit. We already slimmed down our request before we brought it forward. And then I think Commissioner Payne also pointed out something that's worth pointing out. It's not, setting the maximum levy doesn't mean the city needs to spend to the levy that's passed here today. Of course, the park boards will be fixed. The other entities that are down below the city's sum line, but it doesn't mean that. Yeah, that's it.
Commissioner Priest-Stinson, are you finished? Anyone else? All right. Well, I will speak for just a minute. As painful as it is for me to say this, I am going to oppose the resolution before us, as well as the one that I believe might be offered afterwards if this one does not prevail. When I ran for this office, I described it as a balancing act between the needs of the city and the ability of people across the city to pay. Last week, I told you I thought the mayor's 8.1% property tax increase proposal was too much. I still do, but I said at the same time that I could support it if I got the commitment to have a serious look taken at diversifying revenue sources, and I feel like I've gotten that. And I think that'll be a good thing for the city and a good thing for property taxpayers. This proposal would take that 8.1% increase to 8.5%. And so I think it would be contradictory for me to support it for that reason. It doesn't mean that I won't support something down the road. I realize your need is now, but to me this pushes things beyond the level of sustainability for property taxpayers, and that's what I'm hearing from constituents. So, any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Commissioner Fry.
No.
Commissioner Benny.
Aye.
Commissioner Payne.
Nay.
Commissioner Chuktai.
Nay.
Vice President Priest Stinson.
Aye.
President Brandt.
Nay.
There are 2 ayes and 4 nays.
All right. We are back to the main motion. Is there any discussion, any additional motions before the board? Okay, I see no additional. Excuse me, Commissioner Payne.
Thank you, President Brandt. I would like to make a motion to amend the resolution for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Fund levy from $88,444,432 to $89,488,432 to bring the total tax levy from $510 million to $511 million. So as I said in my previous comments, I really appreciated the previous motion, and I'm also trying to weigh some of the tax burden that this would bring. And I just really centered the needs of the workers and the needs of our youth and our city around programming. And when the park board brought their recommendation to us last week, I was very grateful that they broke out their request by line item. And so I just really focused in on the line items that were associated with worker wages and with youth programming. And so this motion reflects those changes. And so I move to make that amendment if there is a second.
Second.
We have a motion seconded. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Benny.
Thank you, President Brandt. I do have to acknowledge, and I think all the members up here have expressed their appreciation and support of the work of the Park Board, and that I definitely acknowledge and appreciate that. Further, I'd like to say thank you to, I'll say Commissioners Payne and Chugtai for bringing this forward and recognizing this this gap that is truly the most critical of our request, and putting it before us here to consider. I think the impact on the overall tax burden of this impact is small, and as you do your work, with the budgeting the remainder of the year, maybe there's a way to address this. So thank you very much. I will be supporting this.
Commissioner Chugtai.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm really glad to bring this motion forward alongside Commissioner Payne today for this body's consideration. Last week, we received a presentation from the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board outlining some of the challenges with the amount of property tax revenue that is allocated to their budget in 2025, and the challenges, particularly with some of their board's priorities. And I can really appreciate that has been that trying to figure out how to fund the items that are needs that you have identified as needs is difficult to hold. I think I know that the mayor worked tremendously hard alongside his staff and staff in the administration to get that number to 8.1%, and had to say no to a lot of really excellent ideas that we agree with, that support the direction we want to go in as a city, investments that we believe our residents need in order to be able to get to a number that was much more manageable. And so I know that there are a lot of excellent ideas that did not get funded within the city's recommended budget this year, and as we on the council are looking at the recommended budget and deliberating over the next few months. The idea that we are now further prioritizing and potentially looking at making some changes to the budget to alleviate that burden is hard too, and in that same way, I can really appreciate the ask from the park board and the previous motion by Commissioner Abene and Vice President Priestinson. But this alternative path allows for us to invest in park workers. So the difference you're seeing here is about $894,000 to pay for that, the increased labor costs as a result of contract negotiation. And then the $150,000 for expanding free and reduced park programming to across our city. And on that list of needs, these felt like the most critical and things that I know our body has expressed support for, and so would ask for support from members in increasing the maximum for the park board. The overall impact this will have on the levy is going from the 8.1% up to 8.3%. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll.
Commissioner Fry.
Nay.
Commissioner Bene.
Aye.
Commissioner Payne.
Aye.
Commissioner Chugtai.
Aye.
Vice President Priestinson.
Aye.
President Brandt.
No.
There are 4 ayes and 2 nays.
All right. Now we are back to the main motion as amended. Let's see, did we get that moved before us? Yes, we did earlier. All right, is there any discussion on the main motion to set the levy for 2025? And do we need to read that out loud, or since it was on the agenda, is that sufficient? Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to just make a comment or two here. As I said, I was prepared to vote against the mayor's proposed levy, and it's been amended now, of course. What convinced me to vote for it, despite the pain it's going to cause for people, 10.5% tax increase on the median household before the amendment, is that the mayor is willing to make a commitment, and I believe he's supported by Commissioner Payne, to look at these alternative revenue sources so that we don't depend on the property tax ad infinitum to bail us out when we have a tough budget situation and transfer the pain, particularly in times like these where it falls on people in big houses, little houses, houses all over the city. I think this has the potential to be a breakthrough for the city to diversify our sources of revenue. It's going to be a hard road once there's a consensus found on what avenue to pursue, because everything we try will need legislative approval, and that will be a difficult road and test the abilities of our intergovernmental staff. But I hope that the group will look at the possibility, the feasibility, the pros and cons of a city income tax. I'm hoping it's only for higher income earners, sharply progressive, perhaps a payroll tax, perhaps an increase in the city sales tax, although that is more regressive than a income tax would be. But I note that St. Paul has a penny and a half tax for the city share of the tax on each dollar, and we're at a half a cent. There may be reasons for that I'm not familiar with historically, but that suggests one area where it's potentially available, for revenue raising. I'm glad to hear that the city is already on the issue of expanding the downtown area for the restaurant and liquor taxes. 2/3 of the North Loop, the East Hennepin and University area, and the area down close to Franklin Avenue are now not included. The payoff for that might not be as great as some other revenue sources that we might find. There's also a more equitable LGA, although that's a tough fight because there's many interested parties there. I hope that if we come up with one of these additional revenue sources, there'd be a willingness to share the new revenue with the park board in the same proportion that LGA is shared, so that they have the chance to grow as the city budget is growing. I'm not kidding when I said my earlier vote was very painful to take. I'll leave it at that, but I want to thank the mayor and I want to thank the council president for their commitment to look at additional sources of revenue. And is there any further discussion? Commissioner Priest-Stinson.
I would just like to say that despite the way that it might look, I do think this is a progressive decision overall. I actually do support the increase, as painful as it is, because while I have my own personal story, this isn't about me or any of you. This is about the future of our city and pivoting to long-range planning, and where there's a lot of uncertainty, but we're also forging a new path, and there's going to be pain points involved. I also, the reason I say it's a progressive decision overall is because it does show that we're not operating in a scarcity mindset. We are thinking in abundance, and that we're thinking that we know that there's alternative revenue sources, and we're willing to do the research and put together groups of professionals that work together collaboratively to get to a new time for our city. And so in those ways, I think that this is a progressive decision, while difficult. And so overall, I support the direction we're going, and we pass off a series of even more difficult decisions now that we set the maximum levy. And again, I can't say it enough that I am a partner. And so I look forward to continuing to collaborate with all of you as we move into looking at these alternative revenue sources and lending my hand in the ways in which it makes sense. And so I want to thank you all for your leadership.
Commissioner Benny.
Thank you. Always good comments from our vice president here. I would say that I appreciate that comment, and that what is progressive, something that's progressive and that's working really well in our city, I think, is our park system. We've all those of us who've lived here for a long time, or as adults, totally take it for granted, but it is the best park system in the country, doing amazing things, employing the most youth workers of any single employer in the city. So we have progressiveness staring us right in the face. So let's not ever forget that, because I think that's a mistake. I'm contemplating, I actually have another potential motion here queued up. I am not going to move it just yet, but in the spirit of kind of noodling around the edges about what it's about, it's really still in support of the workers. You know, we will be, because we're a progressive organization and in a progressive city, we're opening new parks in parts of the city that have had underinvestment. And instead of with a scarcity approach of opening a park and making the workers that clean the bathrooms and mow the grass, just hurry up, do one more bathroom, you'll be fine. And then letting those workers feel demoralized that they aren't given the time needed to do the job that they know they can do is, I think, a terrible tragedy. So again, I think I'm contemplating that. Before I would do that, and maybe there's some more discussion there, I would love to hear from my colleagues about that. But again, we're opening Graco, we're opening Upper Harbor Terminal, we'll be preparing to open North Commons Park. I also wanted to comment about the revenue sources. Yeah, I would hope that that's what happens every day around this place, or that other place across the street, whatever building it's happening in, that additional revenue sources are being contemplated all the time, and strategies. But also spending. What are we spending our money on in the city? I hear a lot about parks. If you ever look at real estate listings in the city, the last 5 photos of every single property that's for sale in the city of Minneapolis is showing pictures of the parks. Oh, I think it must attract people here, right? So that's a value add that we're doing. So why would that be the thing that wouldn't get funding? Now, I don't mean to sound like an ingrate. I certainly appreciate the motion that has already been added to and adopted by this body. I really do. But why would we let the obvious things go right in front of our face and reach for something further away? I'm also not convinced about the idea of the value of looking for efficiencies. I've worked in the government sector for a long time, and the park board is a ridiculously lean, mean playground machine. It is a lean and efficient organization, and working every day on data. We saw it here last week presented by Abdo, spending the money where we said we would spend it, where we know it's needed, and not budging from that plan. So I want to point out one more thing. Am I allowed to continue to ramble on here, President? We have a limit at the park board.
Ramble ahead.
Thank you. So I want to point out something in the city's budget. So the city's budget, as we know, and this is in the vein of what we're spending money on and what is a basic city service, right? So to me, basic city services are something that you staff, right? That's what you hire staff for. Everything else is extra, right? So that's one way to tell if whether or not it's a basic city service. But the overall city budget proposed for 2025 is $1.88 billion. And if we I'd like to look at one category of spending closer, and that is contractual services. So this is a huge category overall, and it includes outside contracts for construction, the different studies that people want to do, planning or whatever, and also for internal services such as IT department and rent, maybe fleets and things like that. That's a common practice. But all in, the number in the budget, the city's budget for 2025 is $591 million going to contractual services. This is 31% of the total budget, and it's the largest single category of spending, even more than salaries and wages. So if you're going to be talking about revenue sources for the city, one thing you might do is really try to play up the way in which the city as an enterprise spends money with other businesses, because a lot of this money is going outside of city government and funding businesses, right? Buying their professional services and all of that. But I'd like to look at a subset of that number of contractual services that are funded by the property tax levy. So in 2025, the proposed number is $165 million. And I'll note that this number was actually higher this year in budget. And it's proposed to rise again in 2026, but historically it's been much lower. From the time period of 2014 to 2020, this category of spending averaged $93 million per year. The median and the average were very close. For 2025, what's proposed is a 78% increase over the historic average. The line item with the largest increase in this category, again, the category is contractual services funded by the levy, is miscellaneous. And it follows the same pattern of spiking in 24, dropping a bit for 25, and then proposed to climb again in 26. Historically, it has a median value of $1.9 million. For 2025, it is proposed to increase to $23 million. This is an increase of over 10 times, and we're talking about $500,000 for the park board, right? So In researching this category, miscellaneous contractual services, the online budget tool, which is awesome, does not allow you to drill down into any more detail. So this is a black box, both to the BET and the public, right? This is $23 million being spent, sending it outside of the city enterprise for something, right? We don't know. So ideally, this type of spending would have the most transparency people can ask for. And is this a basic city service? That's what I would say. So I would love to have some discussion about that, or to anyone that would maybe be open to me putting forward one more motion to at least cover the additional staffing for the parks that we're opening in the city.
Commissioner Bennett, is that a motion?
No.
Okay.
Hoping for more discussion.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing Commissioner Fry.
So I appreciate the question. I do wish that the answer that was already provided by our budget staff was reiterated in a public fashion. And these miscellaneous dollars are contracts that are entered, yes, indeed, transparently. All of city spending has to be transparent. It's put out there for the general public to view. And the reason that the miscellaneous dollars is labeled as miscellaneous is because it didn't neatly fit into one of the other categories. Not to mention, some of these miscellaneous dollars function as a placeholder for other or new spending proposals that haven't been fully baked yet to that point. And so departments will often reallocate these dollars throughout the year to the appropriate codes as the codes come to bear. And so I want to make very clear, there's not a lack of transparency. Every dollar needs to be accounted for by law. And so that comes forward on a near rolling basis. There are contracts that are above a certain amount that, of course, need council approval. There are contracts below a certain dollar figure that don't, but all of them have to be accounted for by law. I'll also note that, I appreciate, in government, by very nature, people want to create kind of juxtapositions between different budgets. They want to create areas of parity. There is a difference between the city enterprise as a whole and the park board as a unit. I fully understand the independence of the park board, have long supported the independence of the park board and continue to do so. And so I'm not going to make the explicit comparison to other departments within Minneapolis, but other departments within Minneapolis have received significantly less money than that which went to the park board. There are increases this year. Those increases paled in comparison with the recommendations and the requests, I should say, that came forward to my office. And some of those requests were not really optional in the sense that they're legally required, like, for instance, a consent decree. So some of the biggest spending, new spending, beyond employment or contractual services came in the form of staffing for those positions themselves. And so, I just want to discourage the kind of parity shifting, because if we want to do the parity, we could talk about some of the individual departments as well. Again, I have long supported the increased funding to the park board. I continue to do so. In previous budget years, we put forward, again, I don't have the numbers before me, but near record funding, or in fact record funding, to make sure that ongoing source of revenue is there for the park board to use in any way it wants. And I'm also cognizant of the fact that we as city elected officials, we as commissioners, myself as mayor, we don't allocate dollars to specific sources that the park board decides to use. We allocate money. We allocate a lump sum, and then the independent park board makes decisions as to what to do with that lump sum. And so I would argue strongly we can't say independence on one side, but then say well, if we're cutting, here's the specific thing that we're going to cut on the other. You are cutting X, Y, or Z, because we got to kind of keep the same arguments the same way, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, I'm very appreciative of the work that you all have done. But with the full spectrum of issues that we're presently dealing with, that has been the source of my no vote. And I'll just note also that I will also be a no vote on this one, not because I disagree with the vast majority of the budget. In fact, I do agree with the vast majority of the budget, including that allocated in the recommendation to the Park Board. But I don't support the additional property tax increase beyond. So.
Seeing no further discussion, I'll ask the clerk, do we have, has someone moved and seconded the amended resolution? All right. We're ready to go then. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Fry.
Nay.
Abene.
Aye.
Payne.
Aye.
Chugtai.
Aye.
Vice President Priest-Stinson.
Aye.
President Brandt.
I will abstain.
There are 4 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 abstention.
All right. We've disposed of this item, correct? All right. Our next item is the draft 2025 calendar of regular meetings for the BET. You all have copies of the draft calendar before you. Do my colleagues have any comments or questions? Any discussion on the draft calendar? We have moved forward the presentation by the Director of Banking, Investments, and Debt a month at his request. And I'm not aware of anything else that's an issue.
Mr. President, Commissioner Abene was seeking recognition.
Excuse me. Commissioner Benny.
Thank you. I'm talking too much tonight. But the February 19th date, it doesn't have an assigned topic, but it is actually a park board night. And so I'm trying to, I don't know if I'll be the park commissioner here in this role next year, but I'm trying to, not have conflicts. And so I don't know why it wouldn't have been scheduled for the 4th. I don't see a major holiday or something like that. For the 4th Wednesday, sorry.
Per the charter, Commissioner Abene, the Board of Estimate and Taxation meets on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays.
Yep.
That's unless the will of the body is to change that date.
But if the 12th is, why, the 19th, is that the 4th?
Let me see.
I think it's the 3rd, but, It's-
If I could ask the clerk a question.
Yeah. I believe I have made an error in the calendar.
Okay.
Oh,
All right, so you'll correct that before we bring it forward for
I
a
will
vote.
change that to the 26th of February.
Okay.
I have 2 more.
Go ahead, Commissioner Benny.
Okay, so on September 17th, that is also an NPRB night. It's like this night. Is there something in the charter that requires it to be on this night? That week, because that's this 3rd week? Or is it just timing with the budget process?
Commissioner Benny, I believe it's timing with the budget process, but
Okay.
perhaps our attorney could respond more clearly.
The maximum levy needs to be, Chair, members of the board, the maximum levy needs to be certified by September 30th. So there could be a different time where it's adopted, but there has to be time for, staff to be able to get it ready to be certified. I don't know if we move to the next week whether that would be something that could be done or not.
Okay.
Commissioner Bennett, one other point is that on, I believe, the next following Wednesday is the 24th, and that is a day we are not scheduling meetings.
Okay. That's right. There is maybe a religious holiday there. That
I
was the other
believe so.
thing. Okay, so what I might do is see what I can do to influence the park board to be on a different night that night. And then the last one would just be just a comment on that very last December 17th meeting, although I have doubt that it would actually occur. It's also in conflict with the park board, and I would probably prioritize the park board that night. So those are my comments. Thanks. I'm glad we caught a typo. Thanks.
Thank you. If I could just ask the clerk a question, is it the charter or the bylaws that set our meeting dates?
President Brandt, thank you for correcting me. I misspoke. It's the
Okay.
bylaws.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure I had that correct. So this is seeing no further discussion. We will receive and file this item, and we'll vote to adopt the calendar at our October 9th meeting. And we next come to the discussion portion of our agenda, and I want to apologize to my colleagues. I voted in error on what turned out to be the main adoption motion for the levy. I don't know if it's possible to change my vote at this point, but I had intended to vote for the levy. I was confused by a different party's vote and thought we were perhaps voting on something different from what I thought I was. So is it possible to change my vote at this point?
President Brandt, if there's no objection from your colleagues,
Okay,
we can
is there
change
any
that.
objection?
No objection.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, our next item is a discussion of instituting a staff response protocol for the BET, and I believe that is linked to the agenda. And this was something that came up in a meeting of the Senior Manager, Executive Secretary Search Committee, and from Commissioner Chugtai, who noted that the council has used this procedure in order to make sure that when it asks a question during a meeting that the staff is not anticipated or is prepared to answer, that we can get an eventual answer. Any discussion on that? Commissioner Priest-Stinson.
My only caveat, and so it's wonderful that our clerk, Casey Carl, is here, was especially while we don't have a staffer, I just wonder about how much work that creates, and I don't want to end up in a position where I'm at odds with our trusty clerk. And so I'm just wondering, is just some discussion around, do we think that's the best thing that works for us, or is this something that temporarily makes sense until we have a staffer? And that's kind of what I was curious to have some discussion around.
Commissioner Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to give some context to this protocol. This emerged on City Council as a result of moments when a council member might have a question for staff, that especially technical questions that maybe you would need to refer to some research or some data that just wasn't prepared for that presentation. And we were getting into these moments where it would be almost come off as a standoff of, asking the question and it feeling like, staff just want to give accurate information. They don't want to be put on the spot. And so this was kind of a pressure relief valve just to say, we're not going to lose sight that this question still exists. And we're going to also give time for staff to be able to answer in a more thoughtful, accurate way so that they're not on the spot. And so it kind of created this situation where now there's just, it's less intimidating to get random questions on the dais because we have created a formal process for getting back to members. And it's proven very helpful in those moments when somebody would ask a question, the staff member would say I'll definitely get back to you, and sometimes you would just lose track of things, and so it's been very helpful for that. The one thing I wonder about for us is, in the context of city council, it's typically a department head who has got a very formal role of being the subject matter expert in a particular area, and therefore, and frankly, an entire department worth of staff to support them to get those answers. And so the one thing, and also just a very regular meeting schedule. And so we typically get our answers back. That questions that come up in committee, we're usually getting those answers before that cycle's council meeting in general. And I wonder if the BET cadence is as helpful for that, or is there too big of a time gap in between when that question gets asked and when the answer comes? But long story short is it's been tremendously helpful on city council to just have a standard process for accommodating those types of questions when staff don't have an answer at the ready.
I think I'll jump in here. I think Commissioner Priest-Denson raises an apt question, who sort of keeps track of this. At the council level, it is the committee clerk. Is it the person who's caught off guard? Is it a department head? Is it the committee chair? Commissioner Payne, if you could just answer that, please.
Yes. Mr. Carl, the city clerk, has graciously offered up his staff to be the facilitator, so they document the question that was raised during the meeting, and then they share that question to the appropriate department staff. So typically the department head, it is the department head's responsibility to get the answer to that question back to the body.
Commissioner Priest-Denson.
So essentially, it's a tracking tool, and the clerk staff is just moving the transmittal of that memo back and forth as the answers are provided. They're just sending it back out, but not having to do the work of answering the questions. So that makes it clear for me. That's just the point that I wanted to clarify. Like, where's the burden of the work and how much is it? But this is clear to me.
And I would not object, once we have a staffer, of shifting that duty to the staffer to keep track of things, particularly since we will be having a transition in the clerk's role. So this is on for discussion. Is there consensus that we should shift to this, and do we need a formal motion at a future meeting? Or is this something we can implement as a procedure?
Mr. President, if I may,
Mr. Carl.
Casey Carl, the city clerk, I want to maybe echo or add a little bit about the process that Council President Payne described. It was, I think, a very clever device that he and Council Vice President Shugtai this term developed for the council in terms of not just tracking and providing a sort of standardized process for capturing these questions, but also, I would add as clerk, on behalf of the public, a level of transparency. Questions are often raised, and if there isn't a way of closing that loop, it can seem from the public perspective that there wasn't an answer. And so the other piece of that is that the responses from departments are added into the legislative file in LIMS, so that closes that loop, so that not only the members of the body, whether that's a council body, a committee of the council, have access to that information, hopefully in terms or in time before a vote, as the council president indicated, but also the public has access to that information as well. So it's both a tracking and a transparency device, I would say. There is, I don't want to minimize the amount of work that the clerks do. The clerks have to actively document the question as it was asked during the meeting. They have to track all that piece, run that to make sure they captured it adequately, that we captured the intent of the question from the council member, and then we facilitate to the department, we facilitate getting the answers back from the department, and we make sure it's distributed to the body and added in LIM. So it's much more than just sending out the question. There is some work to that. But I do think it's a process that we launched this term. As I mentioned, the council president and vice president developed that process. We worked with them to come up with some standards. I think it works fairly well. It's something we've fine-tuned over the last several months, but I think it has a fairly regular rhythm. So I just wanted to add that context. in terms of your question specifically, Mr. President, about process, I think certainly it's always best if the body takes a formal action to say we want that. You have a model using the council's process. I think staff could probably easily come back with an example for you or a final version for you at your next meeting. So there's a formal vote in response to a product and not an in-theory product, which is looking at the councils, which would need to be slightly changed to match the Board of Estimate and Taxation. So if that's your direction, I would suggest that you either act by a motion or without objection from the body, the president would be directing the clerk to work on a draft for BET that could come back to your next, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, come back to your next meeting, and then you could formally vote to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. I think that makes sense. Commissioner Benny.
Thank you. I looked at the form. It makes sense for tracking and all of that, and creating it forces a process. But the one concern I would have, so for this meeting, I actually did ask a couple of questions in preparation for this meeting tonight of the city staff, and then of course I had to work with the park board staff, and I had to prepare for a park board meeting that I have to leave and go to when we're done here, and I have a full-time day job. So I also don't want anything that's going to be a barrier to me being able to do what I need to do as the park board's representative here. So if it's an arduous process, or if I have to come up with justifications or something like that, I think that'd be a problem. My main thing is if I'm carving out some time to be able to do something here, that's what I think I should be doing. I should not have undue process put on me, I would say.
Thank you. Chair is willing to entertain a motion to direct the clerk's office to develop a protocol for question and answer follow-up for the next board meeting, if that's appropriate. Is there anybody willing to make that motion?
I'd move that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Benny, followed by Commissioner Priest-Stinson, followed by Commissioner Payne.
Just briefly, will we have thank you, President Payne, the ability to comment on that document once it's presented to us?
If I could answer that question, I believe it would be presented at the next meeting, and then we would discuss it, and then there would be a vote. Commissioner Priest-Stinson?
I just wanted to add add some comment to what you were raising. I actually think it alleviates those things happening, because oftentimes, I think we're going to take it up at another time, but oftentimes there can be some discussion or difference of opinion in directing staff to do things, and I think this eliminates any opinion about whether we're directing someone to do something by having a clear process and agreement for how information flows, and also provides for the transparency. So I think actually it would eliminate that happening of which you raise. So I would be in support of it. I think it'll work out well and actually ensure that doesn't happen for you in as many ways as it can.
All right. Commissioner Payne?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Benet's concerns and share a little bit more context behind where council adopted this process. And one of it was there was a desire from the administration that council at least get some of those more complicated questions to them ahead of time, so they might be able to show up to committee prepared. And we have advocated to members to do that as much as they possibly can. One of the things that just naturally happens, though, is as you're consuming a presentation, your questions just come to mind in real time, and you're not always going to be able to pre-identify every question that you might have before a meeting. And to your point, you have too many commitments to put that additional legwork ahead of a meeting. And so the entire purpose of this process was to say, hey, let's encourage members to ask questions in advance as much as can, share them in advance as much as they can. But in the event that it just organically happens in committee that some questions come up, let's just document it, track it, make sure that you get that answer in a timely way. So your experience as a member of the body doesn't change. You can ask any question that comes to mind, as smart or silly as you can imagine. And the thing that we've actually asked the chairs to do of each committee, and so this is an important note for you, Mr. President, is to make a really explicit request of the clerks to say, can you document this question for further follow-up? So, because there's oftentimes that a member will ask a question out of curiosity, staff might know the answer to it, they might not, and it may not be that urgent of a question for them that they would require a formal follow-up. And so we've kind of communicated to both chairs and members, try your best to acknowledge that you would like a formal follow-up so that the clerks have that signal of what to document. And from there, it's truly just the clerks passing it on to the subject matter expert and then making sure that it's filed when we get the answer.
All right, we have a properly made and seconded motion before us. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Commissioner Fry is absent. Commissioner Bene.
Aye.
Payne.
Aye.
Chutai.
Aye.
Vice President Priest-Hinson.
Aye.
President Brandt.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes.
Thank you. The motion is adopted. And I might note at this point that the mayor was called away by an emergency, so he won't be returning. Our final item is a staffing discussion. And this item was suggested by Commissioner Priest-Stinson, given that we will be preparing to supervise somebody for the first time within the experience really of all of us on this board, supervising our own employee. And our current bylaws in Article 5 say that no officer or member of the board may individually instruct the executive secretary or any other employee. And I think the intent of Commissioner Priest-Stinson, and I'll let her speak for herself, is that we should have some discussion of whether that's adequate or whether we want any modifications of that before we bring somebody on board. Commissioner Priest-Stinson.
Yes. I just think that the board has operated how it has operated. I've watched for many years, and I don't think that anything different is happening. We're getting a staffer again, which we've had before. But where I do think it's important to have clarity is around what it means to direct. So, for example, it's not a apples to apples analogy, but however, council has their staff and they may ask them to provide them with particular research or some information in order to be able to make an informed decision. I don't see that as giving direction. What I would see as giving direction is operating outside of their job description or making similar to what we just did, right? We just gave a direction because we voted on it for somebody to do something specific, and they are going to do that and then bring the product back, and then we will take a vote. That is giving direction, but by following a process. If we did that and you were sitting there or I was sitting there and we didn't do any of that, that I would consider inappropriate and would be providing direction. And so I want to make sure that my analysis of that is correct, and also just make sure that we have clarity so that when we do get the staffer, we are clear what is meant by giving direction versus needed information in order to make informed decision as a member of this body and execute our duty.
Commissioner Payne.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, did you wish to speak?
Oh, no, that must have been
All right.
up from before.
All right. Commissioner, Mr. Caro.
With respect to the body, I want to address your analogy, Vice President, and suggest that the appropriate person you're comparing them to is not a council member's aide. Council member's aide is appointed by, hired by, and part of the statutory provision for those aides is the duty of loyalty to the principal. The position that is more applicable to your executive secretary is the city clerk. And the city clerk is appointed by and reports to the entire council. The city clerk does, however, take direction from the president, the vice president, and the other members of the body, but I don't report to them. I report to the body. And your executive secretary would report to the BET, would need to be responsive, obviously, to the individual members. And I think you summarized it well. I just wanted to make the comparison. Is this position is not an aid to individual members, it is an aid to the body.
And going into this, not having had this role before, it would strike me that there'll be a certain amount of direction that will be needed between myself or whoever is chair when the person is hired in terms of getting comfortable in the job and allocation of time. On the other hand, I'm hoping that we can adopt a board work plan that will list a number of research projects in addition to the day-to-day and yearly cycle duties of the staff member that the board will agree on as a consensus, and then we can assign that work plan to the staff and give some sense of the priority. Commissioner Priest Stinson.
I should have also provided context the way in which this came up in our hiring subcommittee is that there's been discussion back and forth about what would be in said job description or not. And so there's been some difference of opinion between our CFO, who is not a member. I relooked at our vote. They're not a member of that committee, but we did agree that we would have them consult within their professional experience. But they're not a member that has any vote in any way. But there's been several things that we brought up that has been questioned on whether or not that's giving direction. So I want to just make sure as we're moving forward that what is the way in which to make the analogy that I made the most clear so that there's no confusion and future tension. And then also some specifics around how does a role like this, so yes, a work plan, but also what does it look like when it's a staff that still needs professional development and would need feedback on how they're performing in their role and things of that nature. And so as part of all of this, it should be something that we name because the way that it's worded, I don't have it right in front of me, but they serve the whole body, but the person that I don't know what the right word or phrase to use is. It's not reporting to, but they're supervised by the president. And so defining the process for which is it in alignment with other city roles and how we give performance evaluations. And I just think that is an important thing to name, and we should identify it and include it in the work and name it now before we get to the point of hire and, we're having these discussions embarrassingly after we have someone in the role. So do we want to take that up in our staffing subcommittee and then bring it here? But I just want to name it that it's something that's important for us to name and be part of the overall process of hiring someone and making sure that we're clear on both of those points to avoid confusion.
I certainly would be comfortable with the hiring committee taking it up. I did check with former President David Wheeler, and he did, I know, provide, for example, some of the evaluation of the person who served in that role, and perhaps people from the clerk's office participated as well, and a variety of people, and I think that's appropriate, but it's nice to spell it out ahead of time. Is there any further discussion on this item? Okay. Seeing none, I believe we have concluded our business for the day, and without objection, we stand adjourned.